This has been a long time coming. For the longest time, I've always wanted to talk about Final Fantasy. But for whatever reason, such as not having any of the games, or when I did have the games, I didn't have a way to record them, I just didn't have a way to actually talk about them. To me, it's just as synonymous a name from my childhood as Mario, Sonic, Pokemon, and Kirby. So I've wanted to talk about this series for a long time, and I can officially say that. I have almost every game in my collection, and yeah, let's just start it off. Before I start, though, I'm not going to be talking about all 15 Final Fantasies. That would take all year. Instead, I'm going to be talking about the first 6 games and splitting the NES games and the Super Nintendo games into their little sections with a small break between them. Also, most of these aren't going to be the originals. The only games that I'm really thinking of are Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy VI. Most of these are going to be remakes, mostly because half of them actually didn't hit the US originally, so we only have the remakes to go off of. Also, I'm going to talk about the remake of the first game, mostly because I don't think the first game really has aged all that well. It's not that fun to play, and it's actually kind of irritating. I do have the game, it's just I just don't want to play it. I also don't have an NES to actually play it on, so really there's no reason to actually try it out. Anyway, enough of the details, let's get started with the Final Fantasy Marathon.
So yeah, the original Final Fantasy. I played a bit of the original thanks to my emulation days. It wasn't exactly perfect when you have a pretty garbage PC that couldn't run most of my Steam library with some lag spikes and glitching. But from what I played, that was an experience. Some things just don't work, namely half the spells, which either do nothing or actually do the opposite of what they're supposed to do. Some of the stats don't work, and the translation is absolutely miserable. Welcome to 1987 translation, everybody. So I'm gonna do myself a solid here. I'll be looking at the Origins collection on the PlayStation. Since this game also has the first instance of Americans getting the second game, I feel it's best to talk about this version back to back with that game as well. Plus, it isn't too drastically different from the original game. It has these options that make this version better, but I didn't bother with half of them since, sheesh, no thanks. And this option is just straight up pointless. For a while I did opt out for auto-targeting and dashing, since at first I didn't really need them, but over time I found them to be wildly convenient and actually pretty time-saving. Some of you guys might cry foul that I'm not being as authentic as possible, but I don't really care. I really don't want to play the NES version, and this game still has some problems that didn't exactly get fixed from the original. So I might as well be playing the original Final Fantasy just with some quality of life fixes. So our story centers around the 4 Warriors of Light. You can choose 4 of any 4 class, which are as follows. The fighter who takes a lot of punishment and also deals a lot back. The thief has amazing agility and has the highest chance of running away from enemies. The monk can do max damage and defense with no equipment on them. The red mage is basically a jack of all trades. The white mage specializes in healing and buffs, and the black mage specializes in elemental damage and debuffs. For this adventure, I chose the fighter, red mage, white mage, and monk, and named them accordingly after some friends. Thanks to the limit, I can only use up to 4 characters, so here you go, Zack, Jay, Danny, and John. And yes, I know I can do more characters in the naming slot for the Origins collection, but I'm trying to limit myself here, so shush. As the Warriors of Light, you're first tasked to save the Princess of Cornelia, Sarah. You kill the captor Garland and send Sarah back home. Wow, that was a pretty short game, and oh wait, that was a prologue? Well, okay then. I kinda like their little dances like, yeah, we made the bridge! It looks so goofy. The Warriors of Light do this a lot too. And I also like the little twirl they do after staying at an end, that's kinda cute. Anyways, from this point, the story kinda stops at points. You have some small objectives like giving this witch her glass eye, or giving this elf some dynamite. And they do connect to the main story to an extent. The original 5 Warriors of Light were on a quest to take out the Overlord Chaos, who has apparently created a time loop that consists of only 2,000 years, meaning events will repeat over and over until the fiend is defeated. However, the warriors lost and were turned into bats. He didn't kill them, they just... okay, that's weird, but okay. In order to fight the fiend, however, we need to take out the 4 elemental fiends that block the power of the 4 crystals of light. This is the meat of the game right here, going over to the locations of the crystals and beating their ass to the ground. You will need to go over to other dungeons to grab some important items to proceed, and some NPCs will give you specific items to help you on your quest as well. It does suck though when you're in a dungeon, you go up to a chest that you think will contain something that's crucial to progression, which really emphasizes it when you're required to fight really tough enemies at that point in the game before grabbing the contents of said chest, only to realize... yeah, maybe talking about the game itself would be a good idea. Final Fantasy is a standard turn-based RPG, while you'll take turns taking out foes and vice versa. The one thing I don't necessarily like right off the bat is the turn order seems completely random. This leads to me thinking way ahead of time, like healing a teammate before they die, or these freaking cockatrices turning one of my warriors into stone, making them completely useless. Oh my gosh, I hate these things. While I would like to know who goes first and whatnot, it doesn't affect the battles that much as long as you're fairly leveled. As traditional RPGs go, you will gain experience and level up when you have enough experience built up. You will get some stat increases, namely your health and a couple of miscellaneous stats like luck, vitality, and intelligence. Funny thing though, while some stats work fine like vitality to boost your HP gain, strength to boost your damage output, and ability to boost your critical rate, stats like luck and intelligence do absolutely nothing. Luck does work in the PlayStation and GBA versions where it affects your chances of running away, but the original, this stat was just straight up useless. Just like intelligence, which unlike luck, actually doesn't affect anything in either the NES or PlayStation versions. It's supposed to affect your magic and how much healing or damage it would do, but that means nothing here. You better get those higher level spells, specific weapons, and armor that do special effects, didn't really use this much, and a shit ton of potions, which become cumbersome later in the game. You can only hold up to 99 of these things, and they only heal upwards to 40 HP, which in the late game, oh, that got annoying quick. Anyway, aside from experience, you'll also gain cash in the form of gil. And the game is very strict on the amount you gain in the early stage of the game, but you'll most likely max out completely by endgame. I'm not kidding you, by the second to last dungeon, you'll be swimming in so much gil that you'll have nothing to spend it all on. I was shocked when I got that amount, honestly. Even when I got to the most expensive pieces in the game, I got all the magic I needed, didn't use a lot of them actually. I got a lot of the armor and weapons I needed from dungeons, so I didn't need to visit the shops past the halfway point. And the only consumables you can get are potions to heal HP, antidotes to heal poison, gold needles to heal stone, and portable save stations like sleeping bags and tents. Cottages were what I used exclusively once I was able to buy them. Not only do they heal more HP than the sleeping bags and tents, they also heal up your magic usage, so you can start using the cure and life spells during dungeons. But yeah, despite the high amount of money you'll get, there really isn't a lot of things you can spend them on. Since the consumables are usually very cheap, and even with the expensive ones like gold needles and cottages, you don't need to max out your inventory to be completely prepared. I would have liked to have more space for potions at least, or introduce high potions in the game since the sequel did introduce the damn things, or better yet, make the intelligence stat worth a damn. But along with your preparations and stats, you are going to be using them for the random encounters. There will be times where you will run into fights, possibly with light fodder in the early game, but later on, more threatening foes will be thrown into the mix. Some of the enemies I freaking hated to fight at first were located in the Marsh Cave and Terra Cavern. Marsh Cave had these annoying slimes that tend to either have high physical or magic defense, which made fighting combinations a pain in the half. And then we had the Pisco Demons. These assholes take a ton of punishment and also deal the same amount back, though their stronger variant was never a problem for me. Maybe I overleveled at that point, but they were not a problem at all, even with their mind-breaking powers. Terra Cave, however, where do I start? I already talked about these assholes, but there was also this part of the dungeon where every space was an enemy encounter. Me thinking that this would lead to an awesome find, I checked the abundance of Hill Gygus, which just looked like buffed out Great Danes in this game, the annoying lizards, and really strong minotaurs. It got me a lot of experience, but when I learned that it looped me back to the entrance, yeah, that felt like a waste of time. Gnomes were also a pain, but they only appeared in certain rooms and they aren't that bad one at a time. Though thinking about it, they can't be worse than the ghouls, and I absolutely hated them after one time they paralyzed my entire party and kept them down again and again and again and again and again and again and again until seriously frick these things. But really, after that point, there weren't a lot of annoying enemies. Most of these encounters were challenging at times, but nothing that frustrating. That's also including the bosses. These guys are actually really fun fights. They did have some scary attacks, but with the right strategy, you can beat them in about 2 or 3 rounds, which is great, and really, despite them not being the most difficult fights, I definitely think the Fiends are the best fights in the whole game. There is one thing that annoys the hell out of me with this game, and it happens with 2 of the dungeons. In Mount Golg and the Ice Cavern, there are points where you're forced to take damage while walking through the dungeons. There's lots of lava to walk through in Mount Golg, and the Ice Cavern has a lot of spiked ice that you have to walk around as well. And while you'll be able to avoid battles during this, which is good because if I have to deal with enemies while taking the damage, that'd be some bullshit, you are going to be taking a little bit of chip damage. Though sometimes that's a better alternative compared to these assholes in both of the dungeons. Jeez, I hate gigs so much, the stupid rated out Scooby-Doos. Anyway. After being the second fiend, who actually looks pretty hot, not gonna lie, you'll actually get the ability to get the Leva Stone and summon the almighty airship, which is so cool for a grand total of 5 minutes. Seriously, why can I only land on the green grass? Not even on the dull grass you can land on. The forest I get, but why not the desert? You found the damn thing in the desert and it looked fine, so what's the deal? But you get this thing and you can go to plenty of places you couldn't go to originally, including the Cardia Islands where dragons live in peace and have hordes of treasure that you can take from the guys and they don't seem to mind your little robbery. You meet the Dragon King Bahamut, and he will help us if we go to the Citadel of Trials to prove our worth. And while my trial was about getting beaten to death by golems and Medusas all for a rat tail, he'll give us stronger classes for our troubles. My fighter turned into a knight which can use weak white magic, aka cure spells exclusively. Why would I use these spells this late in the frickin' game? My red and white mages transform into wizards which improve their magic capabilities, and my muck transforms into a master, where he went from the worst party member to possibly the best one. Though that may be because I've been shoving him with swords and armor for most of the game. Frickin' dumbass. And all that made the rest of the game just not that hard, outside of last dungeon, but we'll get there. When we go through the Shrunken Shrine, we actually get a stone tablet that lets us talk to the ancient sky people, which for some reason are all chicks. They talk about the Mirage Tower and how to enter it to defeat Tiamat, the Wind Fiend. One of the citizens will give us a bell that will allow us to enter the tower. And yeah, the monsters are absolutely no problem. Not even Tiamat. I mean, she knocked out my red mage because Toxin is the most annoying spell in the freaking game, but even then, she went down in just a few minutes. However, a window on the floor, well, it's more like a crystal ball if anything, in the Mirage Tower shows the location of Chaos, which is inside, surprise surprise, the Temple of Chaos. Seriously though, this dungeon is a freaking grind and a half, no joke. This dungeon took me over 4 hours to complete because everything is beating me to a pulp, and the dungeon is really freaking long. And you can only use the warp spell to get out too, which makes it doubly annoying. When I get to the next 2 games, I really need to remind myself to do some grinding sessions. Though the metal files helped when I felt a little more comfortable. This is another addition to the PlayStation port that I cannot praise enough. As long as you don't quit the game for whatever reason, since it is a temporary save file. Most of the enemies in the dungeon aren't that bad. They are the hardest enemies in the game, but I can manage most of them now. Except for these green dragons and their stupid toxin that does approximately 200 HP per party member. Damn these motherfucking things to hell. You do fight the 4 fiends again, but they have different strategies this time. Lich has the flare spell which demolishes everyone's health. Meryl and Kraken lose their weaknesses, and Tiamat has gotten a boost in her stats to an obnoxious degree. But even with all that, they are still rather doable. Again, it's the length of the dungeon that frickin' irritates me. And at the end we see a resurrected Garland, who turns out to be Chaos. What was the entire point of that? Just make him Chaos. At this point, all of my healing spells were depleted and my potions were also wiped out halfway. So I get the memo file made, head in and do my best with shield, steel, haste, and the giant's gauntlets that increase my attack with saber. I died a few times thanks to his overwhelming amount of elemental attacks, but I was able to beat him with John dealing the final blow and everyone else's corpse lying on the floor. And that's it. Nothing else, it just ends with the credits. Yeah, you got this lengthy epilogue, but you don't see all this happen at all, and it takes as long as the Chaos fight itself. I'm not kidding. I think I may have talked about most of the gameplay and story and not really anything else. When I'm talking about an RPG, those are the only things that keep me interested. While the music is very good, Nobuo Uematsu makes some really damn good work. I think they're only great in the remake. Listening to the original NES versions, they aren't too memorable if you ask me. And the look of the game isn't too bad either. The original still looks pretty good for an NES game, and the remakes look really good as well. Well, the only version that doesn't look all that great is the iOS and PC versions. I just don't like how they made the sprites. Also a question for the PlayStation version. Why is there a black border around the screen? No matter in the battles, the overworld, it's all very sloppily cropped. It crops just fine in the title screen and certain other places. It's really awkward to look at. It's a frickin' eyesore while editing this. I wonder if the second game's gonna be like this as well. Final Fantasy is a great starting point for the franchise, and while I think the original has aged pretty poorly, I recommend getting any of the remakes. The difficulty can fluctuate at times, and there are some slight difficulty spikes that I can't stand. I can say that the first Final Fantasy is a good time. Though if I had to recommend one version, go get the Dawn of Souls version on the Game Boy Advance. It has the improvements of the Origins version, alongside other fixes and additional content. The iOS version has these too, but again, that game just looks... yeah.
And with the first game out of the way, next time we're going to be talking about the second game on the Origins collection for the PlayStation, since that was the first time us Americans actually got the game. So with that said, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll play with you guys next time.